My parents invited me to Sunday dinner and casually announced over dessert, "We've decided your sister will be moving into your apartment for the next few months." My brother snickered and said, "You can crash on our couch like a guest." I just nodded and kept eating. They had no idea that 2 weeks ago I'd already signed the papers for a place they couldn't afford to step foot in. I, 32M, sat at my parents' dining table last Sunday, fork in hand, watching my mother slice into the apple pie she'd made from scratch. The scent of cinnamon hung in the air, warm and familiar, the same smell that had filled this house every Sunday for as long as I could remember. My father sat at the head of the table, napkin tucked into his collar, and my brother lounged in his chair with that smug expression he'd perfected over the years. My sister had her phone out, scrolling through something, barely present. My mother set a slice in front of me, her smile practiced and sweet, and that's when she dropped it. She told me they'd been thinking about my situation, about how I had that nice apartment downtown, the one-bedroom with the good light and the parking spot. She said my sister needed a place for a few months while she figured some things out, and they decided it made the most sense for her to move into my apartment. I could stay with my brother and his wife, she added, just temporarily, of course. I kept chewing. The pie tasted like cardboard suddenly, but I didn't let my face show it. My brother leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, grinning like he'd just won something. He said I could crash on their couch like a guest, maybe help out with rent if I stayed longer than a month. He laughed when he said it, like it was the funniest thing in the world, like I should be grateful for the offer. My sister glanced up from her phone just long enough to shrug and say it wouldn't be that long, probably just until she got back on her feet. My father nodded along, saying it was the right thing to do, family helping family, and I'd understand when I was older and had kids of my own. I didn't argue. I didn't protest. I just nodded slowly, took another bite of pie, and told them it sounded fine. My mother looked relieved, like she'd been bracing for a fight. My brother's grin widened. My sister went back to her phone. What they didn't know, what none of them had any idea about, was that 2 weeks earlier I'd signed the closing papers on a penthouse condo in the most exclusive building in the city. 3 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows, a view that stretched across the skyline like something out of a magazine. The kind of place where the doorman wore white gloves and the elevator required a key card. The kind of place my family couldn't afford to visit, let alone live in. I'd been planning this for months. Years, really, if I'm being honest. But the final pieces had only come together recently, and I'd kept it all quiet, locked away where no one could touch it or ruin it with their opinions and demands. Growing up, I'd always been the responsible one. The one who worked 2 jobs through college while my siblings partied. The one who paid off my student loans in 3 years while my brother moved back home and my sister bounced from one failed venture to another. I'd climbed the ladder at my firm, put in the hours, made the connections, and built something real. Meanwhile, my family treated me like a safety net, a backup plan, someone whose success existed solely for their convenience. My apartment downtown wasn't much, but it was mine. I'd furnished it carefully, kept it clean, made it a space where I could breathe. And now they wanted to hand it over to my sister like it was a spare bedroom in their house, like my life was just an extension of theirs to manage and redistribute as they saw fit. I finished my pie in silence while they talked around me, planning out how my sister would move in next weekend, how I'd need to clear out some of my things to make room for hers. My mother mentioned something about storage units, and my brother offered to help me pack, his tone dripping with false generosity. I nodded along, agreeing to everything, playing the part they expected. Inside, though, I was counting down the days. I had a plan, and it was already in motion. The condo wasn't just a purchase. It was a statement. I'd worked with a realtor who specialized in luxury properties, someone discreet who understood exactly what I was looking for. The place had cost more than my entire family's combined net worth, but I'd saved aggressively, invested smartly, and taken a promotion 6 months ago that had pushed my income into a bracket they couldn't even conceptualize. I'd walked through that condo 3 times before I signed. Each time, I'd stood in the living room, looking out at the city below, imagining the moment when my family would finally realize how little they actually knew about my life, how little they'd bothered to ask. The weekend came faster than I expected. My sister showed up at my apartment with 2 suitcases and a carload of boxes, my mother trailing behind with cleaning supplies and unsolicited advice. My brother arrived an hour later with his truck, ready to haul my things to his place. I'd already moved everything that mattered. The week before, I'd hired movers to transport my belongings to the new condo during work hours, when no one would notice. I'd left behind the basics, the furniture I didn't care about, the dishes and linens I could replace without a second thought. The apartment looked lived in enough that they wouldn't question it. When they started sorting through my things, deciding what I'd need at my brother's place and what could go into storage, I told them not to worry about it. I said I'd handle it myself, that I didn't need much anyway. My mother looked at me with that pitying expression she reserved for moments when she thought I was being difficult, but she didn't push. I handed my sister the keys, watched her set her bags down in my bedroom, and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no resentment. Just a cold, calm clarity that this was exactly what I'd expected from them. My brother offered me a ride to his place, and I accepted, throwing a duffel bag of random clothes into his truck bed. He talked the whole way there about how it would be good for me to spend time with family, how I'd been too isolated, too focused on work. He said it like it was a favor, like he was doing me a service. I stayed at his place for exactly 3 days. His wife complained about the couch after the first night, saying it wasn't meant for long-term guests. My brother started hinting about rent by the second day, asking how long I planned to stay, reminding me that they had their own expenses to worry about. I nodded along, agreeable and polite, and told them I'd figure something out soon. On the 4th day, I packed my duffel bag, thanked them for their hospitality, and left. I told them I'd found a short-term rental, nothing fancy, just a place to crash while I sorted things out. My brother looked relieved. His wife smiled and said I should come by for dinner sometime. I moved into the penthouse that afternoon. The silence was the first thing I noticed. No one banging around in the next room. No one asking me for favors or expecting me to drop everything for their convenience. Just space, clean and open in mine. I unpacked slowly, setting up my office in the second bedroom, arranging my books on the custom shelves, hanging my art on walls that didn't have scuff marks or cracks. The view from the living room stopped me every time I walked past it. The city spread out below like proof of everything I'd built without them. I didn't tell anyone where I was. I changed my address with my bank and my employer, updated my emergency contacts to remove my family entirely, and set up mail forwarding to a P.O. box just in case. I wanted this space to be untouchable, separate from the chaos they called love. Weeks passed. My sister settled into my old apartment, posting pictures on social media of her coffee on my balcony, my kitchen counter covered in her things. My mother commented on every post, proud of how well she was doing, how brave she was for starting over. No one mentioned me. My brother sent a text asking if I was still at the rental, saying his couch was always available if I needed it. I responded with a thumbs-up emoji and nothing else. I threw myself into work, taking on projects that pushed me harder than I'd ever pushed before. My boss noticed, started talking about partnership track, about long-term growth within the firm. I was good at what I did, and now, without the constant drain of my family's expectations, I was even better. 2 months after I'd handed over my keys, my mother called. She asked if I was doing okay, said she'd been worried because I hadn't come to Sunday dinner in weeks. I told her I'd been busy, which wasn't a lie. She asked where I was staying, and I kept it vague, saying I'd found something that worked for now. She didn't press, and I didn't offer. 3 months in, my sister called late on a Saturday night. She asked if I could lend her some money, just a little to cover utilities, saying she'd stretched herself too thin. I told her I couldn't, that my own finances were tight with the move. She sounded surprised, almost offended, like I'd never said no to her before. I hadn't, not really. But I did that night, and I hung up feeling lighter than I had in years. For months after the dinner, I got a promotion. Senior partner, a title I'd been chasing for half a decade. The raise was significant, the kind of number that changed calculations, that opened doors I'd only been able to peek through before. My boss took me out to celebrate, and I sat in a restaurant that cost more per plate than my family spent on groceries in a week, toasting to a future they'd never be part of. I thought about telling them, thought about calling my mother, mentioning it casually, letting her congratulate me the way she always did, like my success was somehow hers too. But I didn't. I let it sit, private and quiet, mine alone. 5 months later, my brother called. He asked if I wanted to meet up for a drink, said it had been too long, that family shouldn't lose touch like this. I agreed, curious more than anything else, and we met at a bar near his place, somewhere cheap with sticky floors and dim lighting. He asked about work, and I kept it vague. He asked about the rental, and I told him it was fine. He ordered another beer and then, like he'd been working up to it the whole time, asked if I could help him out with a loan. His business was struggling, he said, just a rough patch, and he'd pay me back as soon as things turned around. I looked at him across the table, this man who'd laughed at the idea of me sleeping on his couch, who'd treated my displacement like a joke, and I told him no. I said I didn't have extra to spare, that I was managing my own expenses carefully. He looked at me like I'd slapped him, like the word no was a language I wasn't supposed to speak. He pushed, asked what was going on with me, why I was being like this. I shrugged and told him nothing was going on, I just couldn't help. He left the bar angry, throwing cash on the table and muttering something about me changing, about success going to my head. I finished my drink alone and drove back to the penthouse, the city lights reflecting off the glass as I pulled into the private garage. 6 months after that Sunday dinner, my mother called again. This time, her tone was different, less casual, more concerned. She said my sister needed to move out of the apartment soon, that the few months they'd promised had stretched longer than expected, but now it was time. She asked if I wanted it back, if I was ready to move home. I told her I wasn't. I said I was settled where I was, that she should list it or rent it out or do whatever she wanted with it. My mother went quiet on the other end, and then asked where exactly I was living. I kept it vague again, said it was across town, nothing special. She didn't believe me. I could hear it in her silence, but she didn't push. That night, I sat on my balcony, a glass of wine in hand, looking out at the city. I thought about that dinner, about the casual way they decided my life for me, about the assumption that I'd go along with it because I always had. I thought about my brother's smirk and my sister's indifference and my parents' expectation that I'd simply bend. And I thought about this place, this beautiful, untouchable space I'd built for myself, and I smiled. Update 1. It's been almost a year since that Sunday dinner, and I'm writing this from my home office, looking out at a skyline most people only see in postcards. I thought the story ended with me walking away, building my own life, keeping my distance. But my family had other plans. 3 weeks ago, my mother showed up at my office. I don't know how she found out where I worked. Maybe she'd always known, but she walked past security, charmed her way past the receptionist, and was sitting in the lobby when I came back from a meeting. She looked smaller than I remembered, older, her purse clutched in her lap like a shield. She asked if we could talk, and I took her to a coffee shop down the street, neutral ground where I could leave if I needed to. She spent the first 10 minutes apologizing, saying she'd been worried, that I'd pulled away so completely she barely recognized me anymore. I listened, waiting for the real reason she'd come. Finally, she got to it. My sister was in trouble, real trouble this time. She'd racked up debt, fallen behind on payments, and was facing eviction from my old apartment. My mother asked if I could help, if I could co-sign a lease or loan her some money, just enough to get her stable. I told her no. Not angrily, not coldly, just clearly. I explained that I'd worked hard to build a life that was mine, that I couldn't keep being the solution to problems I didn't create. My mother's face crumpled, and she asked what had happened to me, where the son she raised had gone. I didn't have an answer for her that she'd want to hear. I paid for her coffee and walked back to my office, and I haven't spoken to her since. My brother found out about the penthouse 2 weeks ago. I'm not sure how. Maybe my mother hired someone to follow me. Maybe he saw my car in the garage. Maybe it was just dumb luck. But he called me, furious, demanding to know why I'd lied, why I'd pretended to be struggling when I was living in luxury. I didn't explain myself. I didn't know him that. I told him my life was my business, and if he had a problem with it, that was his to deal with. He called me selfish, said I'd turn my back on family, that I'd regret this when I was alone. I hung up before he could finish. The truth is, I don't feel guilty. I don't feel like I've lost anything. I spent 32 years being what they needed, bending and breaking and rebuilding myself to fit their expectations. And the moment I stopped, the moment I chose myself, they acted like I'd committed some unforgivable betrayal. But here's what they don't understand. I'm not alone. I have friends, real ones, people who see me as more than a resource. I have a career I'm proud of, work that challenges and fulfills me. I have this home, this space that's entirely mine, where I don't have to shrink or hide or apologize. I don't regret walking away. I don't regret the silence or the distance or the life I've built in the space they used to occupy. And if that makes me selfish, if that makes me the villain in their version of this story, I can live with that. Because for the first time in my life, I'm living for me. And that's worth more than their approval ever was.